Hi. The first thing I saw when I stepped into the house was a folder on the kitchen island, a manila file, dead center on the marble, squared to the edges, intentional. No stray mail. No note. No light except the island's pendant above it, making the folder seem staged. I set down my keys, opened the file. 3 pages, laser printed, with a title that stopped my breath. Revised House Expectations. Collaborative draft with Dr. Elena Marks. Dr. Marks, her therapist. A name that had been surfacing more and more in the past months, in her phrases, in small behavioral shifts, in the way she'd started correcting the way I spoke during even casual conversations. I read. Emotional expectations, required tone adherence, mandatory, respectful verbal posture, during discomfort events, movement agreements, pre-scheduled solitude hours, restricted access to certain rooms during individual restoration periods, conflict protocols, forbidden topics, no conversations without prior consent on certain issues, escalation sequences involving written statements if disagreements became unsafe. It wasn't therapy language anymore. It was legal adjacent, codified, prepared for records. Phrases jumped out like landmines. Emotional unsafety, historical invalidation patterns, protective boundaries necessary for household equilibrium. I had heard fragments of these in the last month. After therapy sessions she came back from with an odd glazed calm. Now I saw what they had been building toward. This wasn't healing. It was groundwork. It was evidence preparation. No warmth. No affection. No acknowledgement of partnership. Just rules. Control. I stood there, the pages trembling slightly in my fingers, not from fear but from something sharper, betrayal without confrontation. She hadn't spoken to me about this, hadn't suggested we review it together. This was a filing, one I was meant to find alone and silently comply with. I set the pages down carefully, fingers pressed to the granite to steady my breath, and aloud, to the empty kitchen, I said, "If this is a contract, there are other terms I can review." The clock ticked above the sink. The house was silent. A key turned in the front door. She entered a moment later, tote bag on her shoulder, reusable shopping bag in her hand. Casual clothes, hair tied back. No sign of tension. No acknowledgement of the file now open on the island. "Oh, you're back. I didn't think you'd be in tonight." Her voice was light, pleasant. I watched her, carefully, and forced my own tone neutral. "Flight got in early." She kissed my cheek, brief, distracted, then unpacked groceries as if this were any other evening. "You saw the document, right?" she asked casually, over her shoulder. "Dr. Marks and I drafted it, just to give us better clarity. No pressure. Just guidelines." My mouth felt dry. "I read it." "Good." She smiled brightly, too brightly. "I think it'll really help us." Us. I studied her face, the slight tightness around her eyes, the rehearsed calm. Years ago, she would have met me at the door. We would have opened wine, laughed, argued about how long my work trips were getting. She used to lean against this very counter, barefoot, sipping from my glass when she thought I wasn't looking. Now she was laying down house law, drafted with a third party, without consent, without conversation. I didn't respond, just watched. And she, taking my silence as agreement, bustled about making tea, humming softly. The casual choreography of someone already moving into a new role, not partner, but overseer. Later that night, in our bedroom, now apparently a shared neutral space, under her document, she read in bed as if nothing had changed, as if no contract lay between us. I lay beside her, eyes open to the ceiling, one hand resting on my chest. A thought crystallized. She wasn't preparing for healing. She was preparing for exit, or war. And I would not walk into that war blind. No confrontation. Not yet. I rose early the next morning, before she stirred. In my study, a room not yet restricted under her document, I opened my secure folders, old property records, financial logs, began thinking, mapping, quietly. If she was laying down terms, I would review others, and not on her timeline. The first week under her new rules felt like stepping into someone else's life. A life where every glance, every footstep, was catalogued, judged. On Monday, a laminated copy of the Revised House Expectations appeared on the refrigerator door, as if it were a chore chart for a middle school classroom. I stood in front of it, reading again. The words hadn't changed, but their implications grew sharper. Movement agreements had teeth now. Her study, once simply a spare room where she kept books and a yoga mat, was now private therapeutic space. Entry required prior texted permission. The same for her reflection hours, in the sunroom, scheduled and posted on a shared calendar. The first time I crossed paths with her on one of those afternoons, just coming in for coffee, she glanced at me coolly and said, "This is my reflection time, per the document. I'll need space." No emotion. Not even annoyance. Just process. I nodded, retreating without a word. Not out of agreement, out of observation. Conflict protocols became theater. At dinner, conversation drifted to household bills. A neutral topic, one would think. I mentioned an upcoming tax assessment. Her face stiffened. "I'm not comfortable with that topic during mealtime," she said evenly. "Please review the protocol for timing discussions of financial stressors." She delivered it like a line from a script. And I realized that's exactly what it was. I nodded again, filed it away. Another data point. Emotional expectations were the worst. An invisible gag order. Any frustration, even a clipped tone, was met with her calmly stating, "I'm sensing escalating tone. I'll disengage until we can resume respectfully." She would then leave the room. No discussion. No engagement. I wasn't watching my wife anymore. I was watching an avatar, someone coached, practicing a strategy, and strategy meant motive. By Wednesday, I was done treating this as marital strife. It was legal positioning. That realization came as I sat paying household bills online, the one realm she hadn't yet restricted. Not fully. Scrolling through the transaction list, one item caught my eye. Recurring consulting fee, EM Consulting LLC, $2,000. I frowned. I didn't recognize the name. Clicked through to the statement detail. Initials matched. EM Consulting had no prior records in our books. The first charge had appeared 6 weeks ago, recurring bi-weekly. And the routing path, it didn't hit Dr. Marx's private practice. It went through this LLC first. My pulse slowed, focused. A quick search revealed that EM Consulting LLC was a newly registered entity, formed 2 months ago, address linked to a co-working office suite downtown. The registered agent? One Thomas Marx, Dr. Marx's husband. I leaned back. Not therapy. Not healing. A pipeline. Someone was moving money, structuring it outside typical therapeutic services, hiding the true scope. I pulled older statements, scanned for more anomalies. Another one. Collaborative emotional consulting, materials fee. A smaller charge, labeled differently. Again routed through EM Consulting. They were siphoning funds, and masking it, and I realized with a chill, doing so with her approval. No therapist unilaterally drafts a legalistic house contract with a client without deep involvement. This wasn't guidance anymore. It was an operation. One meant to tilt leverage. Financially. Legally. I didn't speak of it. Not yet. That night, over dinner, one of our now stilted, shared meal periods, I watched her smile, polite but distant. She asked about my work, commented on the weather. I watched her hands as she spoke, calm, untroubled. Practiced. Somewhere beneath that veneer, she knew. She was already building her narrative. I thought then of my girl, sleeping upstairs, in the neutral space she still called her room. I thought of how easily this kind of legal framing could be turned not just to take the house, but to sever the bond between us. That was when the stakes became clear. This wasn't about room access. This wasn't about emotional protocols. This was about ownership, of space, of reputation, of family. And if they wanted to play that game, I would learn the rules, fast. The next morning, while she conducted her private meditation hour, I began a full review of all household records. Not phones, those could be wiped or staged. Not GPS. Not surveillance. Paper. Contracts. Deeds. Authorizations. Anything that couldn't be gaslit or erased. I wasn't fighting for comfort anymore. I was fighting for position. I started with the deed. The house had been ours for 6 years, a brownstone we'd fought hard for in a hyper-competitive market. I remembered every inch of the closing paperwork, the weeks of tense negotiations. The structure of the loan had been complex back then, my income securing the primary financing, her name added later through a quiet title correction. At the time, it had seemed like a non-issue. Partnership, after all, was about trust. Now I understood how fragile that trust had been. The original deed and title documents were in a fireproof lockbox in my study, still a space untouched by her. Movement agreements. I retrieved them, spread them out on my desk. The key detail came back fast. I was the sole original grantor. The final filing structure, due to how the loan had been underwritten, gave me primary control unless altered by mutual agreement and notarized amendment. That amendment had never been discussed, never signed. I was certain. I cross-checked the county recorder's site anyway, and that's when I saw it. Trust filing, Harmony Family Trust. Date 3 weeks ago. Filed electronically. I clicked through. There it was, a partial equity transfer, moving a significant portion of the house's value into this newly created family trust. I blinked, hands steadying on the desk. I hadn't signed this. But there, in the signature line, my name. A digital signature. I scrolled to the certification, witnessed and notarized by an outside party, using a proxy document prepared by the estate planner we'd once hired years ago. The same planner she'd recently been meeting with, under the pretense of updating our will. I sat back. Forgery. No question. I saved the entire document chain, multiple backups. Then I called Mark, an old law school friend, now a seasoned real estate attorney. Mark, I said, voice flat. I need a fast, quiet review of a trust filing. I think someone forged my signature on an equity transfer. There was a beat of silence. Who? My wife, I said. With assistance, I suspect. I sent him the files. Within hours, he called back. It's bad, he said bluntly. They used a digital proxy authorization from your prior estate work, completely out of scope. And the trust was advised by Thomas Marks. Marks, I echoed. Dr. Elena Marks's husband. Exactly. Conflict of interest, for starters. But this wasn't sloppy. It was designed. They're moving to sever your ownership claim in stages. Quietly. If you hadn't caught this, they could have restructured the entire title inside 6 months. My pulse was cold steel now. What does that tell you? That this isn't about therapy. It's a legal coup. I leaned forward, voice low. And what happens if she stacks affidavits that I'm emotionally unsafe? Starts building a claim to sever my role as her parent on top of this? That's their likely next move, he said grimly. You need to start documenting now. Financials first. Protections for your place as her parent next. The word custody hit harder than any forged signature. I thought of my daughter, 5 years old, bright and stubborn, her whole world built around this house, around us, around a father who read to her every night and made pancakes on Sundays. Now I saw the full shape of the plan. Not just a financial takeover, a family one. Frame me as unstable, isolate me legally, seize the house and the custody narrative in one sweep. I opened a new file that night, started documenting everything. The new LLC siphoning funds through EM Consulting. The forged trust transfer. The sudden appearance of her support circle, friends from her therapy group, now speaking in lockstep about emotional unsafety and reclaiming agency. Her recent consults with the real estate agent who had once been our mutual friend, a woman I now suspected was playing a deeper role. I didn't confront. Not yet. Instead, I prepared. If they wanted to play a legal game, I would not be the man who reacted. I would be the man who documented, strategized, controlled the evidence trail. And above all, I would not lose my daughter to this. Not without a fight she couldn't imagine. It was Mark who confirmed the next layer. He'd looped in a specialist, a family law attorney named Rachel, who had seen patterns like this before. She spoke to me late on a Thursday night after reviewing the trust documents and LLC payments. Your wife's therapist isn't acting alone, Rachel said bluntly. This is a coordinated extraction play. And based on the tone of that so-called house expectations document, they're building a record of you as an emotional risk. I already suspected as much. But hearing it in legal terms sent a new current of ice down my spine. They'll be gathering affidavits, she continued. Friends, group members, anyone coached to say you've been creating an unsafe household to undermine your role as her parent. The word caught again. Not just the house, not just the marriage. My daughter, Rachel added. You need eyes on any communication she's having outside the home. Friends, legal advisors, that therapist group. If they're preparing for a custody action, they'll try to catch you unprepared. That night, I stayed up, cross-referencing every pattern I could see. House visits, new phone numbers logged on our home Wi-Fi, who had been coming and going in the past month. A name kept surfacing: Melissa Hart, the real estate agent we'd used to buy the house. Melissa had been a close friend once, dinners together, double dates, long talks over wine. Lately, though, I'd noticed her name coming up more often in my wife's schedule: coffee meetings, evening catch-ups, therapy-related events. And the final proof came 2 days later. A forwarded property listing email, mistakenly CC'd to our shared family account, from Melissa to my wife's personal email. Subject: New listings preview, as discussed. No, both of you. Listings in my wife's name alone. My jaw locked. She was already preparing to move, to buy separately, using Melissa as both agent and ally. It was the next night when I saw the true depth of the betrayal. I came downstairs late, unable to sleep. The house was silent. Light spilled from her study door, left ajar. Inside, I saw her laptop open on a Zoom call. Screen recording by habit. A lawyer's instinct I'd kept sharp. On the screen, 4 faces. My wife, Melissa. 2 other women from her therapy group, names I recognized from social gatherings. And the words I heard stopped me cold. We need to make sure the affidavits are consistent. My wife was saying calmly. Focus on household patterns. Phrases like emotionally destabilizing, increasing volatility, concerns for household safety. Elena said those carry more weight. Melissa nodded. I've drafted mine. I can send a template. A cold weight settled in my chest. They were engineering it, not reporting harm, manufacturing it. And Melissa, not just the agent, but something more. Her gaze on the screen lingered too long. The way she addressed my wife, familiar, intimate. And then came confirmation. I'll see you after the appointment tomorrow, Melissa said softly. Us time. Not friendship. Not business. I closed the door silently, heart pounding, recording safely captured. By morning I walked through the house with different eyes. Each space had been relabeled in subtle ways. Her printed room labels, under the guise of clarity. Her study. Her meditation room. Shared family space, with new guidelines taped discreetly inside cabinet doors. Everywhere I turned, the walls were closing in, not physically, but symbolically, erasing me, redefining who belonged where. Even in the living room, once ours, she had added a small framed note. This space honors calm and restorative energy. A subtle signal: no conflict allowed here. No dissent. No me. I stood in the doorway that afternoon, watching dust motes drift through the sunlight. My girl's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs, unaware of the war brewing beneath her home. I swallowed hard. It was always a slow, hostile takeover. Not just legal. Not just financial. Personal. Familial. And if they thought I would let them script me out, of this house, of this life, of my girl's world, they had miscalculated. Badly. It was time to prepare the counter-move. Mark was the first to see it clearly. You've got leverage, he said, voice crisp over the speakerphone. The forged trust document is your wedge, and your original grantor position gives you options. I had spent the weekend buried in contracts, original title filings, loan structures, the property insurance clauses most people never read. The same stubborn thoroughness that made me successful in business was now focused entirely on this house, and on keeping my daughter where she belonged. Mark continued. Here's the critical point. Your original grantor status was never legally amended. The trust transfer was based on a forged signature, an invalid authorization. If we move now, we can file to reassert sole title before they can stack more false affidavits. I leaned forward at my desk, pen tapping against the contract copy. What happens if we do? We preempt their move. The house comes back fully under your name. They lose the asset leverage. And with that, a huge part of their leverage to restrict your parenting role collapses. No unsafe household narrative if you're the uncontested title holder. I nodded slowly. File it. We'll need a specialist title attorney to push it clean. I've got the best. She'll move quiet and fast. While Mark's team prepared the title action, I kept my outward role unchanged. At home, the rules escalated. New time restrictions appeared overnight. Reflection mornings, when I was expected to vacate shared spaces. A formal request for mediation arrived by email, templated language straight from Dr. Marks's office. Dinner conversation now required pre-approved topics, selected each morning and posted on the fridge. It had become a theater of control, and through it all I said nothing. complied where I must, observed everything else. My wife mistook my silence for acquiescence, mistook patience for surrender. During one of her now mandatory house meetings, a bi-weekly session where she outlined household adjustments, I watched her speak with a new, practiced calm. "This structure is helping us," she said, smiling thinly, "and I've been advised that maintaining a clear emotional environment will be important going forward, for all of us, especially for our daughter." A calculated statement, seed planting for any future attempts to restrict my role in her life. I met her gaze and nodded once. Of course, clarity matters. Inside, I was cold steel. One evening, I watched from my study window as Melissa's car pulled into the driveway. Late, unannounced, my wife met her at the door, a brief embrace, far more than friendly. They disappeared into the private space. The affair, I now knew, was not rumor, not suspicion, fact, and soon evidence. Rachel's investigator was already pulling phone records and text strings that would add to the affidavit counter-strategy. But the bigger move came a week later. Mark called, voice sharp with satisfaction. "Title action complete. We filed the corrective ownership claim this morning, fully legal. Certified. You are now sole title holder of the property." A pause. Then he added, "And we've prepared a formal trespass notice in case she escalates." I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Finally, leverage. That night, as my wife sat preparing for another house meeting, her new stack of therapy notes spread on the dining table, I walked calmly to the safe, retrieved the envelope Mark had prepared, and waited. She called the house meeting for 7 p.m. sharp. I arrived at the dining room table at 6:58. She was already seated, legal pads and printed documents stacked neatly beside her. A pitcher of herbal tea. No wine. Not anymore. Across the table, I laid down one envelope. Simple. Sealed. She looked at it, then at me, smiled faintly. "I thought we could review some adjustments," she began, voice calm, words measured. "Dr. Marks suggested a few new boundaries that would help us maintain a more stable environment." Another calculated phrase. Another brick in her custody wall. I let her speak. Let her outline support structures and protective practices, all carefully couched to frame me as unstable, without ever saying so outright. When she paused for breath, I slid the envelope forward. "What's this?" she asked, smile tightening. "New filing," I said quietly. "You'll want to read it." She opened the envelope, pulling out the certified copy of the newly recorded sole title deed, my name alone now controlling the property. I watched her eyes scan the page. At first, confusion, then realization, then fury. "This," her voice cracked, the first crack I'd seen in weeks. "This is a violation of everything we've been building, of everything Dr. Marks and I have worked toward." I kept my voice steady. "You brought therapy into a legal game. I brought law into a therapy game." She stood abruptly, fists trembling. "You can't just do this. This isn't right. This is legal," I said evenly, "and fully recorded. The forged trust transfer is already under review. Your narrative of household instability won't hold if you're attempting financial fraud." I placed a second document on the table. Formal trespass notice. Prepared by Mark's team. Her breath caught. "You're threatening me? In my own home?" "My home," I said softly. "Legally verified. And you should know, ethics complaints are being filed regarding Dr. Marks's involvement. The LLC funneling funds has been exposed. The affidavits you've been gathering? Several are already being withdrawn." Her face blanched. For the first time, her mask cracked fully. "What about our daughter?" she whispered, the word almost a weapon. "I'm her father," I replied, voice steady. "And I will not let you erase me from her life. The court will see exactly who tried to manufacture instability here. I have documentation. I have recordings. I have witnesses." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she sank back into her chair, shaking. The rehearsed calm was gone. The superior smile gone. Now only a woman staring at a plan collapsing around her. "You think you've won," she whispered. I rose slowly. "No. I've protected what matters. There's a difference." Without another word, I left her there, sitting in a house no longer hers to divide. The first formal strike landed 2 days later. Mark's team filed a fraud complaint with the county recorder's office, citing the forged trust transfer. Certified documents were hand-delivered to both the recorder and the district attorney's office. At the same time, Rachel filed an ethics complaint with the state board overseeing licensed therapists. Dr. Elena Marks was now under official investigation for exceeding therapeutic boundaries, facilitating financial misconduct, coaching false affidavits in a pending family law matter. The ripple effect was immediate. By the end of the week, word reached me through a mutual acquaintance. The therapy practice where Dr. Marks worked had placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Melissa was next. Rachel's investigator uncovered a clear conflict of interest, Melissa acting as both agent and undisclosed romantic partner in a property transaction involving contested marital assets. That report landed on the desk of the State Real Estate Commission. By the following week, Melissa's license was flagged for review, and quietly, several of her active listings were pulled. And then came the turn among so-called friends. The first was Claire, one of the women from the therapy group Zoom call I'd recorded. Faced with the prospect of perjury charges for a knowingly false affidavit, Claire folded fast. Her signed statement retracting prior claims arrived through her attorney in under 48 hours. 2 others followed within days. Each retraction chipped away at the false narrative my wife had worked so carefully to build, until her attempt to control the parenting outcome lay in tatters. By the time the first hearing on parenting arrangements approached, the writing was on the wall. Mark and Rachel sat with me in conference. Her counsel will likely advise settlement, Rachel said. Her position is legally weak, and the exposure puts her at risk of losing more than just influence over parenting decisions. Be prepared, Mark added. Socially, she's isolated now. A lot of the people who were feeding her strategy have gone silent. I nodded. Good. Inside, though, I felt none of the triumph they expected, only exhaustion and resolve. The cost had been high, not just in legal fees or time, in trust, in memories, in the image of the life we had once promised each other. But at least now, the essentials were protected: the house, the stability of her world, my name. She wanted house rules. I gave her the deed. Rule it, if you can afford it. Thank you for watching. Bye.